What if I told you that some of the biggest names in jazz, from legendary pianists to groundbreaking drummers, were also part of the LGBTQ+ community? From Spencer Day's heartfelt jazz ballads to Bill Stewart's game-changing drumming, here are 20 jazz stars you didn't know were gay. 1. Billy Strayhorn. If you ever listened to the jazz standard Take the A Train, you have Billy Strayhorn to credit with it. Strayhorn was a composer, pianist, and arranger who worked very closely with Duke Ellington, one of the largest personalities in jazz history. Most of the tunes most people think are Ellington are actually Strayhorn compositions, such as Lush Life and Chelsea Bridge. Although overshadowed by Ellington throughout his career, Strayhorn's impact on jazz cannot be denied. He possessed a special talent for composing refined, sophisticated music that merged classical methods with jazz rhythms. While Ellington played the songs, Strayhorn was the driving creative force behind them. What made Strayhorn even more remarkable was the fact that he was openly gay during a period when homosexuality was taboo. While most celebrities hid behind their masks, Strayhorn lived his life as he truly was with his friends and colleagues. He never married and had to establish a public image of himself, which was unheard of in those times. His self-confidence and bravery inspired him to be a legend, not only in music, but in life. 2. Ma Rainey. Before Beyoncé or Aretha Franklin, there was Ma Rainey, one of the earliest great blues singers in American history. Dubbed the Mother of the Blues, she was renowned for her strong voice, theatrical stage presence, and talent for relating to people. She was also among the first black women to record blues music, opening the door for generations of artists to come. Rainey was not only ahead of her time musically, she was also fearless when it came to her love life. She was bisexual and was not afraid to show her affections for women. Some of her songs even touched on same-gender relationships, something that was virtually unheard of back then. One of her most popular songs, Prove It On Me Blues, contains lyrics that indicate she was involved with women romantically. They say I do it, ain't nobody caught me, sure got to prove it on me. At a time when women were not much free, Ma Rainey wasn't apologetic about herself. She dressed flashy, drove her own traveling company, and didn't permit society to inform her how to act. She even got arrested one time because she had another woman's house party, but that did not discourage her from being herself. Rainey's impact on music is unquestionable. She taught Bessie Smith, another blues icon, and her rich, expressive singing style influenced the genre of blues. Most contemporary blues and jazz singers continue to mention her as an inspiration. 3. Bessie Smith. If you love blues music, then you owe a lot to Bessie Smith. She was the empress of the blues, and her voice had the ability to shake walls and move people to tears. She conveyed love, heartache, and struggles in life in a raw and real way. Her songs weren't merely entertainment. She had a deep emotional connection. One of the most famous and highly paid black entertainers of the 1920s and 1930s, Smith became a household name through her hit songs such as Downhearted Blues, and paved the way for generations of blues and jazz singers to follow. Yet more than her musical success, Smith lived life according to her own terms. She was bisexual and had both male and female partners. Unlike many celebrities who kept their personal lives under wraps, Smith wasn't afraid of showing her true self. She was bold, confident, and utterly unapologetic. Her lifestyle even made the headlines on many occasions because she had a wild personality, loved partying, and had a take-no-prisoners attitude. Smith's affair with women was notorious among her contemporaries, yet people were less accepting of it during her era. Nevertheless, she was not willing to be what people wanted her to be. She lived wild as she sang, fearlessly. Tragically, Smith's life was shortened in 1937 when she was involved in a motor vehicle accident. Rumors had circulated that she did not receive adequate medical treatment due to segregation laws, although this has been disputed throughout the years. 4. Cole Porter. Cole Porter left his imprint as a composer and lyricist. If you've ever listened to such greats of the past like I've Got You Under My Skin, Night and Day, or Anything Goes, then you've listened to Porter's brilliance in action. Porter wrote sophisticated melodies with clever words. His tunes were not only catchy, but witty, fashionable, and frequently larded with double entendres. One of the great success stories as a composer for Broadway shows, his music made it into the Great American Songbook and would influence artists of generations to come. But few know that Porter was gay. Within his intimate circle, it was an open secret, though he stayed married to his wife, Linda Lee Thomas, until late in his life. It was a conflicted relationship. She helped foster his career and gave him social respectability, but they were both aware of his true relational interests. Even though he lived in an era where openly gay meant career over, Porter continued to pen songs that alluded to his secret feelings. A lot of his lyrics had hidden meanings for same-gender love, but these were coded in such a way that only particular audiences would pick up on them. His existence was evidence that even during limited periods, individuals managed to communicate. Drama befell Porter in 1937 when he was badly involved in a horse riding accident that injured him for the rest of his life. More than 30 operations later, he never came out of the incident. Nonetheless, he did not stop writing music, attesting to his persistence and devotion to his profession. 5. Gary Burton. If you don't know what a vibraphone is, imagine a combination of a xylophone and a piano, a percussion instrument with metal bars that produce a mellow, ringing sound. One of the greatest vibraphonists in the history of jazz is Gary Burton. He revolutionized the way the instrument was played by employing a four-mallet technique, enabling him to play fuller, richer harmonies no one had ever imagined. Burton gained popularity in the 1960s and 1970s, recording with jazz giants such as Chick Corea, Stan Getz, and Pat Metheny. His music fused jazz with elements of rock and fusion, bringing it to the masses. He received 7 Grammy Awards, attesting to the fact that he was a big influence on contemporary jazz. But Burton not only crossed musical boundaries, he crossed social ones too. In 1994, on a radio interview, he openly declared himself gay, becoming one of the first prominent jazz musicians to do so. Back then, jazz wasn't particularly the most welcoming platform for LGBTQ+ artists, so his move to talk about his relational identity was a big thing. Burton went on to say that being open was a huge relief. He had been worrying about what others would think for years, but ultimately his colleagues and fans accepted him. His courage opened the door for other artists to be honest about their identities without fear. 6. Fred Hirsch. Fred Hirsch has left his mark as one of the greatest jazz pianists and composers of his era. With his expressive and highly emotional playing, Hirsch has been a driving force in jazz since the 1980s, producing dozens of albums and garnering several Grammy nominations. Hirsch's music is very personal, and he infuses his life experience into his playing. He's worked with some of the largest stars of jazz, including Joe Henderson, Art Farmer, and Stan Getz, and has inspired thousands of musicians with his individual style of improvisation and melody. But what sets Hirsch apart is his candor regarding being gay. While most musicians who were gay kept their lives under wraps, Hirsch never hesitated to talk about his identity. He became an outspoken supporter of LGBTQ+ rights, using his platform to advocate for equality and visibility in the jazz community. Aside from being gay, Hirsch has also not been afraid to speak about his struggle with HIV/AIDS. He went into a coma in the early 2000s when he suffered from complications of the disease, and the doctors didn't know whether he would recover or not. But in a remarkable display of resilience, he came back strong and resumed making music, which goes to show just how strong he is. Andy Bay. If you enjoy rich, deep vocals that make every note sound like a tale, then you must listen to Andy Bay. Born in 1939, Bay is a jazz pianist and vocalist with a powerful baritone voice that can unlock the deepest emotions in any tune. His career began in the 1960s, and he collaborated with some of the top stars of jazz, including Horace Silver, Gary Bartz, and Duke Pearson. Bay wasn't only a phenomenal musician, he was also a person who wasn't afraid to be himself. He is openly gay, something that wasn't easy in the world of jazz. particularly during the early part of his career. For years, he had to deal with an industry that viewed LGBTQ+ artists with disdain or expected them to remain quiet about their personal lives. But Bay never let that deter him. He kept on making music, putting out albums that featured his distinctive voice and profound connection to the craft. His 1996 album, Ballads, Blues, and Bay, is a prime example of his skill at combining jazz with raw emotion, and it gained him a whole new generation of fans. Apart from being openly gay, Bay has also talked about his HIV experience, demonstrating tremendous courage and resilience. Amidst it all, he has continued to give the world his voice, demonstrating that jazz is all about truth, passion, and honesty. 8. Patricia Barber. Patricia Barber is yet another jazz performer who has boldly lived her truth. Born in 1955, Barber is a gifted singer, pianist, and songwriter whose clever, poetic lyrics and moody jazz sound have received widespread critical acclaim. While many jazz vocalists sing standards, Barber writes her own songs, fusing jazz with the influences of rock and pop to bring about a sound uniquely hers. Her music is often described as cool and sophisticated, and she has a way of making every song feel like a deep conversation. She has a strong following, with albums such as Café Blue, 1994, and Verse, 2002, receiving critical acclaim. One of the things that set Barber apart is that she has always been publicly lesbian, which is not common in the jazz community. She has never hesitated to write about what she's going through or to speak about who she is in her music. To be honest, she's even discussed how her identity affects her songwriting, which makes her one of the only jazz musicians to openly discuss LGBTQ+ topics in her music. Her boldness has inspired many, both within jazz and beyond. She has proven that being different isn't something to hide, it's something to celebrate and use to create art. 9. Billy Tipton. Billy Tipton's is one of the most intriguing tales in the history of jazz. Born in 1914, Tipton was born female, but decided to live as a man beginning in his early 20s. The music world, and society in general, was not tolerant of gender nonconformity at the time. Had Tipton lived as an openly transgender man, he may never have been afforded an opportunity in the world of jazz. So Tipton took a courageous step. He created a male persona and went on to fulfill his ambition of being a jazz player. He was a pianist and a saxophonist, ultimately the leader of the Billy Tipton Trio, which became successful in the 1940s and 1950s. His playing was smooth, traditional jazz, and he gained recognition as a reputable bandleader, playing in clubs and even making records. What makes Tipton's tale even more remarkable is that his actual gender identity was not made public until after his demise in 1989. Even his immediate family members, including his long-term partner and adopted children, did not know. This discovery caused controversy regarding gender identity and the price people pay to pursue their passions. While Tipton had to keep a tremendous aspect of his existence hidden, his influence on jazz cannot be disputed. Today, he is regarded as a significant contributor to jazz history and transgender awareness, an inspiration to many for his bravery and commitment to music. 10. Johnny Mathis. If you enjoy smooth, love ballads, then you've most likely heard Johnny Mathis. Born in 1935, Mathis was well known for his extremely soft, comforting voice and soulful love ballad. His #1 hits such as Chances Are, Misty, and It's Not For Me To Say made him one of the most popular singers of the 1950s and beyond. His songs were frequently being sung at weddings and love scenes, and he became a representation of love and romance. But behind the scenes, Mathis was grappling with a personal reality that wasn't easy to reveal at the time. In 1982, in an interview, he blithely said he was gay. Although this may not be surprising today, at the time it was a big deal. The music business was still not open to LGBTQ+ artists, and many fans and radio stations responded negatively. The backlash was so severe that Mathis ceased discussing his personal life for decades. It wasn't until later in his life that Mathis felt at ease discussing his identity. He has since become an accepted LGBTQ+ icon, proving that even in an industry founded on love songs, not everyone had the liberty to freely love whom they please. Jackie Shane. Jackie Shane was a singer, but she was more than that. She was a force of nature. Born in 1940 in Nashville, Tennessee, she had a musical passion and an oversized personality that could not be denied. She began performing as a child, and by the 1960s, she was causing a stir in the world of rhythm and blues. Shane's music was energetic and soulful, a fusion of jazz, blues, and R&B. But her voice wasn't the only thing that made her different. It was her brazen attitude. She dressed in flashy attire, wore her hair high and puffy, and never compromised on who she was. During an era when being transgender was never the topic of discussion, Shane lived visibly as a trans woman and embraced every moment in the spotlight. Her biggest hit, Any Other Way, became an anthem of sorts, with lyrics that seemed to reflect her life. Tell her that I'm happy. Tell her that I'm gay. While some may have thought she meant gay in the traditional happy sense, many fans knew there was a deeper meaning behind her word. Though she was successful in Canada, where she played in the club circuit of Toronto, Shane eventually withdrew from the limelight during the 1970s. She spent decades living a low-key existence before her music was rediscovered. Her album, Any Other Way, came out in 2017, and she at last got the recognition she deserved, gracing her with a Grammy nomination. 12. Ethel Waters. Ethel Waters was one of the most significant jazz and blues voices of all time. Born in 1896, she persevered through unimaginable poverty and a difficult childhood to become among the largest stars of her generation. Her singing voice was full, emotional, and profoundly expressive, and as such stood out in both jazz and gospel music. Waters had a phenomenal career, singing some of the most enduring songs of the early 20th century, such as Stormy Weather and Am I Blue? She was also the first black female to have her own television show and one of the first black performers to be nominated for an Academy Award. But Waters' personal life was just as intriguing as her professional one. She dated both men and women. Another one of several of the jazz and blues singers whose romantic life did not conform to the expectations of society. Although she never publicly defined her relational identity, the people closest to her were aware of the significant relationships she had with women, such as with her longtime partner Ethel Williams. As with many entertainers of her era, Waters had to survive in a world that was not prepared for her complete truth. She concentrated on her profession and eventually in life devoted herself to gospel music, becoming an interpreter of spiritual hymns and religious films. 13. Tony Jackson. Born in 1876 in New Orleans, Tony Jackson was a leading figure among the most important early jazz pianists. While his name may not ring as widely recognizable as some future jazz greats, he had an impact that influenced the scene, which spawned the jazz we all know today. A virtuosic pianist and vocalist, Jackson could pick up and perform nearly any piece after hearing it but once. His talents were so remarkable that other musicians in New Orleans admired him, and many attempted to emulate his playing. He was also among the first musicians to write original jazz music, combining various influences into something new and exciting. One of his best-known songs, Pretty Baby, was a jazz standard and has been covered by countless musicians throughout the years. But Jackson wasn't famous solely for his music. He was famous for his personality too. At a time when being openly gay was risky, particularly for black men in the South, Jackson didn't care. He was flamboyant, bold, and fashionable, dressing in elaborate suits and surrounded by a vibrant social group. He was an energetic performer, and audiences loved his charisma on and off stage. Though his talent was incredible, Jackson never achieved the level of stardom later jazz artists achieved. Some of this was because he spent a large portion of his career playing clubs and bars instead of making recordings. Nonetheless, his contribution to jazz cannot be denied, and his willingness to live in accordance with who he was makes him one of the most inspiring characters in early jazz history. 14. Donald Byrd. Donald Byrd was a trumpeter of jazz and rhythm and blues who became famous in the 1950s and onwards. Born in 1932, he went on to become one of the most renowned trumpeters in jazz, performing alongside legends such as John Coltrane, Herbie Hancock, and Thelonious Monk. His music was innovative and genre-fusing, combining jazz with soul, funk, and R&B. As opposed to Tony Jackson, Byrd was highly secretive about his personal life. Although he never came out publicly, some sources believe that he might have been gay. Yet there are hardly any confirmed facts about his relationships, and Byrd never discussed his relational identity himself. What we do know is that Byrd was a game changer in jazz. He didn't limit himself to playing only one style. He kept changing, kept seeking new ways to move jazz forward. One of his greatest hits, Blackbird, was a fusion of jazz and funk that was one of the top-selling jazz albums of all time. He also taught younger musicians and helped to shape the careers of many of the future stars of jazz. 15. Cecil Taylor. If you have ever listened to Cecil Taylor at the piano, you know he was not like any other jazzman. Born in 1929, Taylor became renowned for his aggressive, experimental approach to playing that transformed jazz into an entirely new entity. Rather than play smooth, melodic tunes, he became famous for free-spirited, frenzied piano solos that literally sounded like deliberate mayhem. His style was a combination of fast tempos, biting chords, and fierce improvisation, which made him a frontrunner in the avant-garde jazz movement. Taylor's style of playing jazz was so individual that there were even some individuals who didn't know how to put it into words. His shows were energetic, and he tended to play the piano as if it were a percussive instrument, slamming the keys with amazing speed. While his approach wasn't always soothing to the ears, it revolutionized jazz forever, inspiring scores of musicians who were drawn to his bold innovativeness. Although Taylor was never a household name, he was greatly admired in the jazz community. He played for decades and won numerous awards, including the Kyoto Prize, one of the most prestigious awards for artists. Taylor was also openly gay, which was not common for a jazz musician during his era. Although he wasn't very vocal about his private life, he never concealed who he was. In a macho-dominated genre, Taylor stayed true to himself, showing that jazz could be an arena for everyone. 16. Dave Koz. Dave Koz was a saxophonist who had a smooth, calming sound. Born in 1963, Koz was one of the biggest names in modern jazz and was often playing a mixture of pop and jazz that his music became extremely popular. Unlike the experimental sounds of Taylor, Koz's sounds are pleasant, melodic, and simply ideal for creating a relaxing atmosphere. Koz became popular in the late 1980s and 1990s, recording successful albums and touring with music icons such as Stevie Wonder, Barry Manilow, and Celine Dion. He also became a household name on television, hosting radio programs and even appearing on talk shows to help promote jazz music. In 2004, Koz openly announced that he was gay, one of the most prominent LGBTQ+ personalities in jazz today. He has since then utilized his visibility to promote LGBTQ+ rights and prove that jazz is an inclusive and open arena for all. 17. Ralph Burns. Ralph Burns is not a name that will ring a bell, but his contributions to big band jazz and Broadway earned him a place as one of the most influential musicians of his generation. Born in 1922, Burns was a pianist, composer, and arranger who played with some of the biggest stars in jazz, including Woody Herman's band during the 1940s. His arrangements were strong, intricate, and full of vitality, contributing to the definition of the big band sound in its heyday. Burns was more than a jazz man, he was a musical chameleon. He arranged for the Broadway stage, working on productions of Chicago and Funny Girl, and even wrote for Hollywood. His film work led him to win an Academy Award for Best Original Score for the 1972 film Cabaret. Although he was successful, Burns existed at a time when openly gay individuals were not exactly easy to find in the world of jazz. Jazz had a hard, manly image, and most LGBTQ+ musicians secretly concealed their relational identity for fear of discrimination. Still, Burns kept himself open covertly with friends and peers, but lived his authentic life in an environment that didn't always accommodate. 18. Tevin Campbell. Though Tevin Campbell is perhaps most famous as an R&B vocalist, his music has bridged over into jazz, making him a significant figure on this list. Born in 1976, Campbell rose to fame as a teen idol in the early 1990s, releasing hits such as Can We Talk and Tell Me What You Want Me to Do. His silky, soulful voice made him one of the largest young stars of his time. Unlike Ralph Burns, Campbell's experience with his own relational identity was more intricate. Rumors about his own life had circulated for years, but he had kept it out of the public eye. It wasn't until 2022 that he finally came out gay, announcing to the world he was finally at peace in his own body. Campbell's impact extends beyond the realm of R&B alone. His singing style and musical selections frequently included jazz, and he has collaborated with jazz artists throughout his career. 19. Spencer Day. Born in Utah. In 1978, Spencer Day is a modern jazz singer and songwriter whose romantic and emotive music has gained him a wide following. His music frequently addresses love, heartbreak, and self-improvement, and his expressive, warm voice makes his songs intimate and ageless. Day was raised in a conservative setting, so his path to self-acceptance had been tougher, but music had been his love throughout, and this assisted him in locating his voice, both as a musician and as an individual. He made a name for himself through albums such as Vagabond, 2009, and Daybreak, 2013, which demonstrated his skills at combining jazz, pop, and Latin rhythms into something distinct. One of the reasons Spencer Day is so unique is that he writes so openly about relationships. Unlike most previous jazz musicians who had to keep their real selves hidden, Day accepts his life as a gay man and uses them in his music. His lyrics are sincere and genuine, allowing anyone who has ever loved or experienced loss to relate. 20. Bill Stewart. Jazz drummers are the foundation of any great group, and Bill Stewart is among the greatest. Stewart was born in 1966 in Des Moines, Iowa, and has collaborated with some of the most famous jazz artists such as John Scofield, Pat Metheny, and Joe Lovano. He is a master of complex rhythms, an inventive drumming technique, and combining traditional jazz with contemporary sound. Though highly regarded throughout the jazz community, many fans might not realize that Stewart is openly gay. Unlike some artists who insert their private lives into their public persona, Stewart has always maintained his private life, allowing his music to speak for itself. Yet his willingness to discuss being gay is significant in an industry that has traditionally been ruled by a more conventional male image. What is most special about Stewart's story is that he confirms relational identity has no bearing on ability or achievement. In a universe where jazz drummers are depicted as rough and tough, Stewart has gained admiration by simply being one of the finest musicians around.